It's a Tuesday, May 3rd edition of Locked On Blue Devils here today. A lot to discuss as the Jon Scheyer era continues to move along. Let's take a look at the one-and-done era as well for Duke men's basketball, as our good buddy Jason Evans from the Duke Basketball Report will join us. We'll talk a little bit about what's going on in the transfer portal for Duke basketball and what's going on with NIL these days. We're talking about all of that here on today's edition of Locked On Blue Devils.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson here. Proud to be your host of the program. Give me a follow on Twitter at _JJ_Jackson_. Follow our show on Twitter as well at LO_Blue Devils. Make sure you subscribe and listen to all of our podcasts each and every day. And also, here for 2 months now at this point, we've been on YouTube every single day. Thank you for watching us each day. Like and subscribe. Share the video with your friends. It means a whole lot when you do that. On today's show, a very good friend of mine, Jason Evans of the Duke Basketball Report, one of the top Duke basketball podcasts. It's been around for a while, and it's a great listen every single time. Make sure you check it out. We've got a lot to get into with Jason, who joins our show now. Jason, as we bring you into the program, it's been a little bit. Thanks for joining me on today's program.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks a lot, man. I got to say, I hadn't really thought about. I do follow you on Twitter, but I hadn't thought about your Twitter handle. You got a lot of dashes there, man. What's with all the underscores?
Apparently, there are too many Jacksons running around, and it's too hard to differentiate all of us.
I got to tell you, as an Evans, I sympathize. I sympathize.
It's too crazy out here for us with common last names. No, so let's talk a little bit about what's been going on. Obviously, the season came to a close. The Duke Blue Devils did, in fact, go on a big Final Four run. I was looking back through our conversations, and the last time you were on the program, Jason, was just prior to sort of the ACC tournament and postseason run for Duke. And as we celebrate Mike Krzyzewski's final team that just concluded, they made it all the way to the Final Four, man.
Yeah, and in fact, I got to go down to New Orleans and enjoyed that Final Four. It was really great. It was a lot of fun, even though the result was not the result that any of us wanted, obviously, but it's a fabulous end to the season. It's very weird, I think, now as a Duke fan. We should be used to it at this point, but when no matter how successful the team is, it feels like it's a brand new team the next year.
Yeah.
And never more so than the current era of college basketball, both with one and dones and with the transfer portal. It's just strange. No one seems to keep anybody together anymore, except for North Carolina, of course.
Yeah, they're going to have a lot of people coming back next season, and this is something that we've kind of been used to with the Duke men's basketball team is turnover year after year after year. And we're also going to get a turnover on the coaching staff this year at the top with Cade Scheyer. On yesterday's program, we talked about the official announcement of Jay Lucas joining the staff. Let me get your thoughts on the coaching staff coming together.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be adding Jay. I'm sure you guys mentioned it on yesterday's show, but Jon Scheyer was generally rated as the #1 recruiting assistant in all of college basketball, and Jay Lucas was considered the #2 recruiting assistant of all of college basketball. So as Scheyer moves up to a head coach, Jay becomes the #1 recruiting assistant, and so Scheyer goes, "That's my guy. I'm taking him." I really feel like if you look at what Duke has done in recruiting, what they've now done in coaching, I know that Jon Scheyer has not coached a second as the official head coach of the Duke basketball team, but every move he has made, as I look at it, I go, that's the perfect move. Bringing in Mike Schrage to sort of run all the back office kind of stuff, to oversee some of the recruiting, and I think perhaps deal with some of the name, image, and likeness kind of things, and just be, Jon Scheyer's right hand. A brilliant move. Bringing in now Jay Lucas, a guy who has coached with Rick Barnes, has coached with Shaka Smart, has coached with John Calipari, just brings a ton of knowledge to the program that we don't have because we're so insular. The Duke brotherhood is really, really strong, and that's hugely important. But every so often you need a little bit of new blood. and he brought it in, and I'm tremendously excited for what Jon Scheyer is building, not just in terms of the team, but in terms of the whole program.
Yeah, Chris Carrawell and Emil Jefferson make out the rest of that coaching staff. Earlier this morning, Duke's social media posted a video of kind of a 2-minute recap of Jay Lucas's first day in Cameron, around the office, around the facility, including meeting Mike Krzyzewski himself. So we kind of knew Coach K would still be around. On the guy's first day on the job, he's still meeting Coach K and sitting down in his office. So it very much so is still Duke basketball, with Coach K being kind of around and being there to help out as well.
Yeah, and that's a hugely important part of all this. We cannot downplay how much Coach K has built an empire, the biggest brand in all of college basketball. And goodness knows we wish he was coaching even longer. I get why he's not, and I wish him so much happiness in his retirement. But yeah, that retirement still including a role at Duke University, fundraising, advising, and overseeing to some extent, just making sure everything's going right with the basketball program. Wouldn't have it any other way.
See, this is awesome because our YouTube audience just got to see the air quotes that you just threw out there.
Yeah, I paused the air quotes would be available to your folks on the podcast as well.
Yeah, no kidding. So, all right, here's our project for today. I mentioned the Duke Basketball Report. You and Donald and Sam and the great work that you guys do with that podcast. Now in off-season mode, and everyone's trying to find something to discuss. You guys kind of came up with this. What is it? A one-and-done draft project that's going to be coming out a little bit later this week?
Actually, it just released today.
Okay.
It was originally supposed to release on Wednesday, and then we went, we've been talking about it for a couple podcasts.
Sure.
Let's just release it today. So it came out today, Tuesday morning. What we did was this: we looked at all the players who've been one and done in Duke history, which goes all the way back to Corey Maggette, of course. And then we had a draft, and you had to pick a team. You needed to sort of say, okay, this isn't just the 5 best, or actually we have a bench, 7 best. This isn't just the 7, who I think are the 7 best one and done players. You had to go by position, at least to some extent. You need to have a ball handler. You need to have a center and the such. And so we conducted this draft. And then we're going to post it on the Duke Basketball Report forums, so people can vote on who picked the best team. And a really interesting thing happened. JJ, you won't be surprised. Who do you think went number 1 in the draft?
I would imagine Zion Williamson would have been the top selection.
Of course, Zion went number 1. Sam had the first pick, and Sam selected Zion with the very first pick. No controversy there at all. I think everyone would agree.
He was on everybody's big board at number 1.
Exactly. After that, it gets a little bit dicey, and I had the second pick, and then Donald went 3rd, 4th. We snaked around. I did something that, maybe it dooms my selection, but I looked really hard at Duke's one-and-done players. I categorized them by abilities and by position and the such, and I realized the position where Duke is the thinnest to some extent is point guard.
I would have guessed that. That's the first thought in my head that was going in there.
So I was, I was picking 2nd. Donald was 3rd, 4th, and then I was going to come around to 5th. I almost waited till 5th to do this, but I decided, no way. I'm making sure I'm getting a point guard, because I think that there's a bunch of players that sort of slot into right behind Zion. And to me, it didn't matter who I took 2nd or 5th. So I took Kyrie Irving. I almost took Tyus Jones. But Kyrie and Tyus are the only 2 sort of possibilities for point guard, unless you're drafting Trevon Duval or Frank Jackson, or maybe Austin Rivers, maybe Trevor Keels. Can Trevor Keels be your point guard? But the difference between those guys and Tyus and Kyrie, huge, right? So I went ahead and I took Kyrie, even though he was injured. By the way, we're only counting their college careers, but I took the player that Kyrie was during the 11 games or whatever it was that we got from him, which was an incredibly impressive player.
No kidding.
And then our draft went on from there. But because Sam selected Zion, I'm going to read you Sam's team. Okay.
Okay.
and I think I thought that picking Zion probably means you win the contest, but because he didn't get a point guard, here is the team of one and dones that Sam put together. It's Zion, Jahlil Okafor, Jason Tatum, Gary Trent, Cam Reddish, Corey Maggette, and Austin Rivers. There's no ball handler. So and I'm going to be very interested in seeing how people vote. I think, look, Zion, Jahlil, Jason Tatum. I mean, those guys, ridiculous studs, but he doesn't have a ball handler. My team ended up being Kyrie, RJ Barrett, Brandon Ingram, Justice Winslow. I wanted some defense, and I got Justice. Wendell Carter is my big man, and then Vernon Carey and Cassius Stanley. By the way, Vernon Carey, to me, is the most underrated one and done player in Duke history. People don't talk about him or thinking about him that much. I looked at, are you familiar with PER, player efficiency rating?
Oh, yes.
PER, for folks who are not familiar with it, really takes a look at your statistics and says, what did you do that was good? And then subtract out what you did that was bad. And it's a very, John Hollinger invented it, a guy who's really smart about basketball. Many people consider it sort of the ultimate gauge of a player's efficiency on the floor. Vernon Carey had a player efficiency rating of higher than 34 his 1 year at Duke. To put that in perspective, Jason Tatum was a 22. I mean, wow. Yeah. Vernon Carey is a really overlooked player. I checked. I believe that the only one and done player at Duke to have a higher than a 34 player efficiency rating, higher than Vernon Carey, Zion Williamson had a 40. He's the only player. So I got Vernon Carey at the very end of the draft. I think my team is great. And then just to fill it out, not that anyone is paying attention at this point, but what the hell? Donald's team was Marvin Bagley, Tyus Jones, Paolo Banchero, Luol Deng, AJ Griffin, Jabari Parker, and Trevon Duval.
I love it.
So that's our and like I said, go to the Duke Basketball Report, go to the forums. There will be a page there where you can vote on who drafted the best set of one and dones. JJ, I'll ask you. I know you weren't necessarily writing them all down, but who do you if you're putting together a team of one and dones, you got a point guard, right?
And I love the vision that you had. I love the strategy there. That's my first thought, honestly, was, okay, I didn't know the parameters of filling out the entire roster to make it an actual basketball team. So that kind of shifted the way you're thinking. The fact that isn't an era based, right? You could go all the way back to the late 90s, early 2000s when you're looking at the players that you could have selected. I'm so in favor of taking Kyrie with the top selection and building out the team the rest of the way. The other thought I wanted to have is a Vernon Carey thought as well. I think often I was kind of looking at some numbers and looking at kind of the season that Mark Williams had. People can hear me on Locked On Rockets lately. The Rockets have a couple of selections there early in the draft, and I'm talking about the Duke guys. I've got a conversation coming up with Locked On Hornets a little bit later in the week as well for the NBA draft perspective. It's got to be just that there wasn't an NCAA tournament to kind of forget those memories that you had with Vernon Carey Jr. and that year being so shifted, because, his numbers on you don't believe what you're seeing when you just look at how good of a basketball player he was in his one season in Durham.
Well, and I think the other thing that impacts Vernon Carey in terms of our impression of him is he wasn't the man on that team. That was Trey Jones's team. And for good reason. I mean, Trey is a phenomenal leader. I'm not sure, there's a very short list of guys who were better leaders in 2 years than Trey Jones.
No kidding.
I'm not sure there is a list of guys who are better in 2 years than Trey was. But that was very much his team. So that's already going to knock, Vernon wasn't the man. So that already knocks him down a bit. And then the other thing is, like you said, they didn't get to play in an NCAA tournament, but the end of that year turned into the Justin Robinson story.
Right.
And Justin coming out of nowhere, a walk-on who not just comes on as a senior, doesn't play the first 3 quarters of the season, and then suddenly Duke's in a game against Wake Forest that goes to double overtime. Every other big man fouls out. They have to play Justin Robinson because they've got no one else. And suddenly this guy turns into a revelation and is an impact player. And I think all of us dream of what would have happened in an NCAA tournament for that team. How much Justin and his ability to go inside and out, especially with his shooting 3-pointers as a big man, how much that had changed the team. And we feel like had there not been COVID, that team would have made potentially a really magical run. Because I feel like at the very end of that year, they were among the best teams in the country, no question about it. All of these things don't involve Vernon Carey. and then when you add to that, his game isn't suited for the NBA, so he's struggled to make an impact at the next level. And I think that's why he gets downplayed a little bit. I mean, in our draft, Gary Trent went ahead of Vernon Carey. If you look at their seasons in college, their one season, there's no comparison.
Right.
Gary Trent does some great things on the floor and has turned into a very, very nice NBA player. But the idea that you would say Gary Trent is a better one and done than Vernon Carey is laughable. And yet, because of all these factors, Vernon Carey gets downplayed.
Justin Robinson had one of the greatest senior night performances anyone could ever have. His final game against North Carolina, and
I was there for that game. I was at that game.
A game.
It was a ton of fun.
Was so much fun before the world kind of got crazy on us. Jason Evans from the Duke Basketball Report is here with us. I can't wait to listen to the podcast. Yes, he just gave away all the teams, but I'm telling you, the banter between these guys is reason enough alone to go and listen to that conversation. I'm definitely going to be listening to it.
You're kind.
As well.
Thank you.
Let's take our first break here in the program. In just a moment, I want to talk a little bit about the transfer portal, what's been going on there for Duke men's basketball. Another edition of Locked On Blue Devils here today. The NFL Draft has come and went. You need to check out the Locked On NFL Draft podcast to know exactly how your team fared. Are you pleased with your first round selection? Did you find a steal in the third or fourth round? Let the guys over at the Locked On NFL Draft recap the draft better than anyone else for you. Also want to remind you about our Locked On ACC show. Candace Cooper doing a great job with that program. Get all of your daily ACC news in less than 30 minutes on the Locked On ACC feed. Check out as well Locked On SEC with Chris Gordy, your daily news in less than 30 minutes with SEC expert Chris Gordy. Let's get back into the program today. JJ Jackson alongside Jason Evans. Follow him on Twitter at Jason Duke Evans. He's with the Duke Basketball Report. The transfer portal is a very hot topic of conversation. On Sunday, players had the deadline to file for get their name in the portal. However that process works for them, we've seen that it could take a day or two for those names to officially all come out. Although at this point on Tuesday, I think we know. I think that we've been able to see the list of Duke guys, none, that have entered the portal, only early declarees for the NBA draft. But there certainly are some targets out there for the Blue Devils, and it seems like that two-guard spot or the wing position is an area that a lot of people want to see the Blue Devils get.
Oh, for sure. I mean, if you really look at the Duke roster for next year, with the addition of Ryan Young over the weekend, the big man transfer from Northwestern, you can construct a two deep, so to speak, first and second team to practice against each other. And by the way, I mean, practice is a hugely important part of building a team, and having a really good second unit that practices against the first unit, crucial to any team's success. There's no question about that. If you look at Duke's two deep, it is really, really impressive at every position except shooting guard. And that's not to say that Duke couldn't create a really good two deep and a good lineup with what they currently have. But there's a glaring hole at shooting guard. And let me just really quick, and you know it, I'm sure, but I'll give you the two deep so you can see it. At point guard, it's Jeremy Roach and Jalen Blakes. At shooting guard, it's to be announced. Maybe Trevor Keels could pull out of the draft. Maybe someone we get through the transfer portal, and Jaden Schutt. At small forward, it's Dariq Whitehead and Joey Baker. At power forward, it's Kyle Filipowski and Mark Mitchell. And at center, it's Dariq Lively and Ryan Young. And that's with Cale Catchings and Christian Reeves still on the team, but as the 11th and 12th men to fill in the slots. Now, I'm not saying that, that Duke won't survive if we don't get a shooting guard. In fact, I think there's an interesting scenario where Dariq Whitehead probably slips to shooting guard and Joey Baker is the starting small forward. and Cale Catchings is getting a few more minutes maybe than you would expect, sort of as a backup small forward. Jaden Shute, and Mark Mitchell. Actually, Mark Mitchell probably also competes for that small forward kind of position. But I think we're all expecting that Duke is looking to get someone else through the transfer portal. And I think the complication at the moment is we don't know what Trevor Keels is going to do. And if Trevor Keels wants to pull out of the draft, if he's not a first round pick and he wants to come back to Durham, there needs to be a space for him. So it's this difficult dance that Duke has in trying to court someone in the portal, someone who's high enough quality that they could be a starting shooting guard, a starting wing for Duke, but also sort of keeping them at arm's length while we wait to find out what's happening with Trevor Keels. And that's sort of why I think AJ Green is the most logical choice. He's the kid from Northern Iowa. A lot of people have heard about him, a dynamite shooter, not a great defender, but a kid who's also in the NBA draft. Most people expect him to pull out. His stock isn't what Trevor Keels' stock is, but he's testing the waters and seeing what the NBA has to say. And maybe if he is on a delayed timeline because of that, maybe his decision and Trevor Keels' decision can sync up a little bit. The complication with him, of course, is that his father used to be an assistant coach at Northern Iowa. That's probably why AJ went to Northern Iowa. And his father has now moved. He moved more than a year ago, and he's now an assistant coach at Iowa State. And, presumably AJ may want to play. If he returns to college, he may want to play for his dad again. But there are indications that that's not sort of AJ's automatic decision, that name, image, and likeness plays a role, and that Iowa State isn't going to necessarily have the same kind of branding opportunities and name, image, and likeness opportunities that you would get at a bigger program. AJ may want a little bit of a bigger stage. No offense to Iowa State, but playing at Iowa State and playing at Duke, not the same thing in terms of the attention you get in the basketball world. So I think I think AJ's probably the best possibility. The other guy that's a possibility is Mobley from Missouri State. Another guy who is in the draft, and so maybe again that draft timeline syncs up better with Trevor Keels. Mosley is bigger, and has more NBA future, I think, than Green does, and I think there's a distinct possibility that he stays in the draft. I think he and Trevor Keels are facing somewhat similar decisions. I don't know that Mosley is quite a first rounder, but I think he's someone who is certain that he would be drafted and pretty likely to get a guaranteed contract, middle of the, first 10 picks of the second round. That's sort of that range. But we need to see what he decides. And it may be that he decides there's some risk there and I want to go to a bigger program, and that, again, Duke is the landing spot. We'll see. I think this whole process is the process of finding the starting shooting guard is at least a couple of weeks away, again, because of this NBA timeline.
Yeah, and that timeline more specifically, it's Tuesday, May 3rd right now. 2 weeks from today, we will have the NBA draft lottery. So 2 weeks from today, we'll find out the order in which teams will be selecting in the draft. They'll have the combine process within that. We're a few weeks away from that deadline for players to say, okay, I'm pulling back out and going back to school. And then
I think the pullout date is June 1st, actually.
June 1st. Okay.
Yeah.
So May 7th is your draft. May 17th, excuse me, is your draft lottery. 2 weeks from today, June 1st is the last day. And then the middle of June is going to be the NBA draft. So just to kind of get the timeline on everybody's mind. There's a conversation online that's taking place as well, because it has been a couple of weeks of this conversation about what that two guard spot is going to look like. And by the way, here on this Tuesday morning edition of Locked On Blue Devils, Baylor Shireman, another name we've been talking about a little bit from South Dakota State, did officially commit to Creighton. Never really felt like Duke was in it as much as he might have been playing them up in it as well, which is a little bit interesting there. But
I think Baylor Shireman, he announced his top 5 the other day, and Duke was in there, and I'm sure John Shire and the Duke coaches were thrilled to see that they'd made the top 5, but I think they knew that that they weren't really in the cards there. There were some teams that were sort of playing a name, image, and likeness game. I think both Clemson and Arkansas supposedly had strong offers for Baylor Shireman. Creighton apparently also had a strong name, image, and likeness offer. But I think the real reason he picked Creighton is that he's from Nebraska, and the possibility of going home to his home state was a big deal. And Creighton is the team in the state of Nebraska. Nebraska University is not nearly the basketball program that Creighton is. And so, look, I wish Baylor Shireman all the luck in the world. I hope he has a great season at Creighton. I never really thought like he was a great fit at Duke. He's a guy who is going to need the ball in his hands a lot. And I feel like between Jeremy Roach and Dariq Whitehead and Kyle Filipowski, for that matter, Duke has a lot of guys who need the ball in their hands. And I'm not sure that Baylor Shireman would have been a great fit. And then the other thing is Shireman's not a defensive player. And Duke has a possibility next year to put a really impressive defensive lineup on the floor. Dariq Lively is a great rim protector. Dariq Whitehead is going to be one of the most advanced wing defenders that you see as a freshman. If you look at what he did for his 4 years of high school, a couple of years ago, it was his job in practice to guard Cade Cunningham.
Right.
I'm talking about Cade Cunningham, who was incredibly elite in college and then is now an elite player in the NBA, has said that the toughest defense he faced when he was in high school was in practice against Dariq Whitehead. This is a dude who throughout his high school career was guarding unbelievable wings every single year in practice, every single day. He is going to be an elite defender. We know that Jeremy Roach is a pesky defender. And I actually think you can put out an interesting lineup, probably with Mark Mitchell rather than Kyle Filipowski, with Mark Mitchell at power forward, where suddenly you've got 4+ defenders on the floor. Well, if we can find a fifth one to play that shooting guard position, or at least a adequate defender, I think that's preferable over having someone who's getting a little bit lost out there. And I worry that would have happened with Baylor Shireman.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit different without Mark Williams anchoring the defense. His numbers on the defensive end are so crazy when you look at it. He's got the 4th most blocks all time in single season history in Duke men's basketball, one shy of 3rd all time. 3rd all time is Sheldon Williams. 2nd all time is Sheldon Williams. And 1st all time is Sheldon Williams. The landlord was different like that. So I do think Dariq Lively is going to be pretty solid down there, interior defense. But to expect him to play at the level Mark Williams is a little bit unfair there. The conversation I wanted to have, however, is I want to go back to Jaden Shute just for a minute. At that 2-guard spot, it does feel like the conversation is Trevor Keels, can you bring somebody in and add some depth there at that position? My message would just simply be this. Jaden Shute is still, at the end of the day, a top 50 player in his class, borderline 4 or 5-star, right there on the cusp, and a guy that's a bigger wing, can really shoot the ball, 6'4", 6'5", just a talented player that I think people are going to fall in love with over the years. So I feel like we get a little bit spoiled with the 5 stars, with the top 10 players in the class, and you can't play if you're not in that ranking. And that would just be my message as well, because I'm in agreement. I want Trevor Keels to come back for his 2nd year, obviously, but Jaden Shute is still going to be a really fun player to watch.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And his job is going to be to fill it up from the perimeter. He's considered probably the best, right in there with JJ Starling and a couple other players as the best shooter coming into college basketball this year. And shooting from the perimeter really matters.
Yeah,
it's a very important part of college basketball, of pro basketball for that matter as well. And I love what Jaden Shute's going to bring to the team. I don't think he is going to be a 25, 30 minute per game player. It's not just his recruiting ranking, but in high school, he played in sort of one of these lower level divisions in his state. So he wasn't facing quite the same level of competition. He's done well on the AAU circuit, but I haven't seen the kind of indication from him that he's ready for this kind of a step up in competition to be ready to be a guy that you rely on for the majority of the basketball game. And again, I feel like if Trevor Keels does not return and Duke doesn't fill that hole in the portal with someone who looks like an immediate starter, I think the more likely thing is that Dariq Whitehead who is a wing who can swing between either position. Dariq Whitehead probably slides up a position, so to speak, from small forward to shooting guard. And you see more of Mark Mitchell. In fact, it's possible that Mark Mitchell is a starting small forward. He is a 5-star recruit, and he showed out really well in the All-Star games this summer. He was the leading scorer for the West in the McDonald's All-American game. So I think you could see more of Mark Mitchell, or there are other combinations that may make a little more sense. And I'm not saying Jaden Schutt won't be a significant player, but I think he's going to be a significant player in the about 15-minute range, not the 25-minute range.
And again, you're right about the competition. Jaden Schutt playing at Yorkville Christian Academy in Illinois. Dariq Whitehead from the New York, New Jersey area, but played high school ball down in Florida at Montverde Academy. As we mentioned, teammates with Cade Cunningham. Also on that team, R.J. Barrett when Dariq was an 8th grader. Also on the team more recently, Scotty Barnes, who beat out Cade Cunningham for the NBA's Rookie of the Year award. Montverde, also the home of Ben Simmons, D'Angelo Russell. I mean, it's a full-on basketball school, and that's the level of competition that Whitehead was going up against every day. All right, I want to talk about the NIL, some of the ramifications that we're seeing right now, and a little bit more as we wrap up our conversation with Jason Evans here in just a moment. Today's edition of Locked On Blue Devils is brought to you by our friends over at Bet Online. BetOnline.net is your one-stop shop for all of your sports wagering information that you might need. It's basketball playoff time this time of year. We're in the Western Conference and Eastern Conference semifinals, and also the start of the Major League Baseball season currently going on. BetOnline is your continued source for all the information that you need, including live betting, playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Want to let you know, here in the state of North Carolina, those Hurricanes in the NHL playoffs got a big 5-1 victory last night over the Boston Bruins. Head to betonline.net to get more NHL playoff lines and props. Bet Online, where the game starts. Final few moments here on Locked On Blue Devils. JJ Jackson hanging out with my buddy Jason Evans of the Duke Basketball Report. And boy, here we are, the second year of name, image, and likeness set to kick off. A lot of schools are going through their exam weeks right now, and the semesters are coming to a close, which means we have officially capped the very first year of name, image, and likeness when you look at the academic calendar. Before we start to look at what next year would sort of look like, do you have any big picture thoughts on what we saw this past year?
It's a game changer. There's no question about that. Look, when the NCAA tournament rolled around, if you went to Yahoo Sports to register for the Yahoo tournament, prediction tournament bracket challenge, you saw Chet Holmgren and Paulo Banchero's pictures. They were not wearing Gonzaga or Duke uniforms. They were wearing sort of, generic fake uniforms, so to speak, because you're not allowed to represent your school. But Chet and Paulo got paid to be in those advertisements. It has been a long time coming. It is 100%, 150% the right thing to do. These players have been toiling away for free for far, far too long. And there is tremendous value in what they bring on the floor. And I'm thrilled that it finally happened for them. That said, I'm upset and frustrated that the NCAA has no idea what it's doing with this as an organization. The NCAA, for decades, heard people saying you need to compensate these players. You need to create a system where they can earn at least a fraction of what they're actually worth. And part and parcel with that, you need a program where the richest schools, the schools that have the richest alumni, don't just buy the best teams, because even in pro sports, we have salary caps, we have other limitations, we have long-term contracts. There are ways that a professional basketball, football, hockey, soccer, baseball, whatever, there are ways that those teams control their roster, and there are ways that those leagues create balance. The NCAA, despite being warned about this for decades, and I have a really good friend of mine who is a financial advisor for professional athletes, who has been talking about that. He literally wrote a book about this more than 20 years ago. The NCAA chose to do nothing. Mark Emmert, who is retiring and leaving the job of NCAA president, was paid millions of dollars a year to argue on behalf of a system that everyone knew was broken and everyone knew was unfair and everyone knew would eventually go away. And even when the NCAA knew it was going away, because California and Florida and several other states passed laws that meant the old system of not paying the players had to end. And they passed those laws with 6-month, year, 2-year timelines. The NCAA, California passed their law like 18 months before the NCAA got, name, image, and likeness came into being. They knew it was coming and they chose to do nothing. And as a result, we have a system now where the two children of JB Hunt, the big trucking company, everyone has seen trucks that have JB Hunt on the side. The JB Hunt family, JB Hunt's children both went to Arkansas, and they are pumping huge money into the Arkansas football and basketball programs, especially basketball. They love Arkansas basketball. When they were in school, was back in the 90s when Arkansas Duke fans remember Arkansas in the 90s. And so these are two huge Arkansas basketball fans. And Arkansas is shelling out name, image, and likeness dollars to build up their roster. They've brought in 6 new recruits. They have the second best recruiting class in the country behind Duke. They brought in 6 new recruits. They brought in 4 new transfers. They have 10 new players. And even though no one's talking about it, I guarantee you every one of those guys is making top name, image, and likeness dollars. I don't blame them. I'm not saying this is wrong that they've done it. I'm just saying they've taken advantage of a system that the NCAA has chosen to completely abdicate from policing. There is no salary cap in college basketball or college football. University of Pittsburgh's about to lose the best wide receiver in the country, supposedly to get paid $2 million to play football at USC. And Pittsburgh is mad. Of course they're mad because they can't match the $2 million. And because there's no salary cap, USC can pay $2 million for a wide receiver. At Miami, they've got chaos in their locker room because Nigel Pack got a 2-year, $800,000 contract plus a Porsche to play basketball at University of Miami. And Isaiah Wong says, hey, wait, I'm almost as good. I'm just as good as Nigel Pack. And my name, image, and likeness deal isn't as good as his.
And I've been here. And
yeah, this is chaos.
Right.
And the blame falls on the NCAA. The blame does not fall on John Ruiz at Miami. It does not fall on the Hunts at Arkansas. It does not fall on the $2 million booster at USC. It does not fall on the many boosters at Texas A&M who have bought the #1 football recruiting class in the country to Texas A&M next year. It falls on the NCAA, which knew this was coming for a long time. They were warned for a long time. Do something about it. Fix the system. They refused, and now we have chaos. And chaos is going to reign for a couple of years at least until the NCAA and the schools and the conferences are able to figure something out. And probably what they figure out is a standard pay scale across all of college sports, and that if you play college basketball or college football or some of the other sports, there is a stipend, and a significant stipend, that you are paid to play that sport, and that maybe reduces things a little bit. But for now, we just got to live with it, and we should be very happy. We should feel very lucky at Duke that I suspect Duke doesn't talk about it. It's not public, but I suspect there are some wealthy alumni who are helping Duke navigate this process. And Duke is the biggest brand, the most marketable brand in all of college basketball. And as a result, we're able to bring in these players because they know there's a way they can capitalize on their brand by being associated with Duke. Jared McCain.
I mentioned this on yesterday's show.
I'm sorry, what?
I said I mentioned the Jared McCain story on yesterday's show. Yep.
Yeah. Have you seen his TikTok?
Yeah.
Dude is a dancer. He loves dancing on TikTok.
1.4 million followers on the app.
Yeah. And if you look at those dancing videos, and there are a lot of them, it is routine for him to get 5, 7, 8 million views on some of those little 10, 15-second videos that he makes. Jared McCain, I think one of the reasons, and he's a great player, one of the reasons he's coming to Duke in the class of 23 is that he's like, I'm already a social media star. You tack Duke onto that. You tack me being on television twice a week, national television twice a week at Duke onto that. You tack us playing, as a number 1, number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, hopefully making the Final Four onto that. You think 1.4 million followers is a lot? I'm going for 3. I'm going for 5. I'm going for 10. That's what Jared McCain is thinking.
And you already got a deal in high school with K Jewelers for Mother's Day. It's crazy what's happening. I think the biggest thing in all of this is, as you're saying, Jason, there's just no NCAA policing of the matter that's taking place. It's up to individual schools to make the decision. As you mentioned a little bit earlier, Paulo and Chet not wearing their school across their chest. I know some schools, as we start this second academic year, from what I've been hearing, some schools are going to change that a little bit. They're going to try and start to handle it themselves in their house, in their university, so that you can get, jerseys, T-shirts of your players to get profits off of it as well. So hopefully those things do continue to change. And Arkansas does such a great job. Obviously, Duke played them in the 94 title game, played them this past year in the Elite Eight. I do some play-by-play work with the SEC Network and was in Fayetteville a few weeks ago. They've got softball players at the University of Arkansas who have major NIL deals with the schools themselves even included. So, it's going to be interesting for sure to see how this continues to play out. We were having this conversation a year ago, not knowing what it would look like 365 days in advance. And the same is said for one full year from now, too.
Yeah, I that's the exciting and also scary part. And it is scary. You never know how things are going to change and how this could evolve. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but let's say some big booster at some school decides to come after some of the kids that Duke has already recruited in the class of 23. It could happen. And by the way, someone throws, I don't know, $500,000, $1 million on the table. Does Jared McCain say no to that?
Yeah.
Does Kenzie Mbako say no to that?
Right.
I don't know how they could. So there needs to be some system in place to make all of this have some kind of competitive balance. And the challenge in that, of course, is at the pro level, you're talking about, 30 teams or maybe a little more than that. Pro leagues are in that kind of ballpark, about 30 teams with somewhat similar resources. When you're talking about college basketball, 350 plus teams
all over the place.
And there's no comparison between the resources at Michigan, Texas, Duke, Alabama, Clemson, UNC, and the resources at, Southern University, Jackson State, Maryland, Baltimore County. I'm not even naming the smallest because I don't even know them that well. But there's such a disparity that it's just a huge issue for the sport. And I actually think one of the unintended consequences of all of this, I think Division I basketball is probably going to fracture, and that you will see, I don't know if it's 40, 50, 60, 80, 100, but some segment of schools will peel off from the rest because it doesn't necessarily make sense to be competing with those schools and to be playing under the same rules as those schools, because there's not much similarity in what your athletic programs are trying to.
Jason, I certainly do appreciate the time today. This conversation has been a whole lot of fun. We've been able to touch on a lot of different topics. I really want people to go check out the Duke Basketball Report podcast. Listen to that draft so that we can hear the banter back and forth between you guys. And as always, man, I really just appreciate you being on the show today.
Absolutely, JJ. Always enjoy it. Let's not make it 2 months next time.
Yes, we'll make it much sooner for the reunion. That's my buddy Jason Evans. He's joining me here on today's edition of Locked On Blue Devils. And that wraps up our show today. If you will, please leave us a 5-star rating and review if you're listening to us on the Apple Podcast platform. That does a lot. Also do the same. Give the Duke Basketball Report a 5-star review as well, if you would. Follow us on Twitter at LO_Blue Devils. That's going to do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.